Thanks for coming, everybody, and thanks for June as well for coming here. I'm delighted to introduce Professor June McDaniel this afternoon. She's Professor of History of Religions at the College of Charleston in the USA. And Professor McDaniel is a specialist in the study of religious experience, especially in Hinduism, and the broader interpretation of religious experience within different cultures as well. She has a number of interesting books out, including the famous Madness of the Saints that I used to use on my courses, Making Virtuous Daughters and Wives, about Brata or Vrata, not Brata or Vrata, but I don't know how to pronounce it in Bengali. B and V is always, anyway, collide, in Bengali folk religion, and Offering Flowers, Feeding Skulls, about goddess worship in West Bengal. More recently, she's written Lost Ecstasy, which I have here, Its Decline and Transformation in Religion. I've just finished reading it. This is an important and fascinating book that discusses ecstasy in religions and the ways in which it has been neglected and even disparaged through suspicion and rejection by traditional theology. And I was particularly interested to read about the Medjugorje and the reactions to that in your book. It's really interesting, I thought. And being explained away in reductionist social science and pathologized by psychology. So the book is a marvelous map of the field and discusses thinkers from William James to George Bataille. So it's a kind of pushback against such reductionism, I think, and theological rejection, and argues that we need to take on board ecstasy as a theme and motivation in the study of religions. And the search for ecstatic experience as fundamentally human, but today transferred into other areas of culture, such as anti-institutional spirituality, even transgression, war, and terrorism. I was very interested to hear George Patton's remarks about how wonderful war was in these ecstatic tones. You know, I was quite surprised by that. Anyway, so I would urge you to read this important book, which will soon be in our library here. So I'm delighted that Professor McDaniel can spend this term with us as a visiting fellow. And this afternoon, the title of her lecture is Visualization in some Bengali Hindu contemplative traditions, Vaishnava bhakti, Shakta Tantra, Baul songs, and Raja Yoga. So Professor McDaniel, over to you.
Okay, thank you. This is very different from that book. This is, I think, more traditional. It's actually talking about a lot of field research that I did and interviews with people where they talked about their own personal experiences. And that's something that interests me a lot. So I'm going to go through some of these. I'll show how visualization works and explain some techniques. And I'm going to show a number of different areas. It's sort of written as a paper and PowerPoint simultaneously. So you'll be able to listen to it and also see it as I go through it. Okay. Now, the intention of this paper to explore understandings of Hindu religious visualization in West Bengal, India, and we're going to look at two approaches. One approach will look at definitions and analyze 4 ways visualization functions in Bengali religion. So we're going to be looking at functions. Another approach will examine the use of visualization in the specific traditions. So we're going to look at the variety. And we can't have a paper on visualization without imagery, so there will be a lot of images. It worked? Okay, so what are meanings for the term visualization? People visualize their goals in life: to become president, lose 30 pounds, make $1 million. Golfers want to have a hole-in-one. Basketball players visualize the balls going into a basket. Runners visualize reaching the end of the race without collapsing. So in all of these cases, visualization is understood to bring the person to a desired goal. We may define it generally as the formation and use of mental visual images. Okay, that's in blue on the bottom. Now it can refer to a lot of different things. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but they have visualization for motor imagery, for geography, for illustration, for computer graphics, for software. Visualization as a term has been used in a lot of different ways. But when people think of religious visualization, they often think of artistic imagery. Gregory the Great called religious images the Bible of the illiterate. And by that, he meant that's how you learn the stories. You learn the stories by pictures rather than by reading words. He notes for a picture provided in churches for the reason that those who are illiterate may at least read by looking at the walls what they cannot read in books. So we have as a function, the images tell sacred stories. This is South Indian Gopuram. It is the roof of a temple. And if you look at the roof, you see that there's all these different stories that are being told. Images help us to visualize the adventures of gods and goddesses and saints and heroes and imagine their worlds. So here we have likely Rama and Ravana. Okay, now we have the kind of visualization that tells stories, but what we're going to look at here is meditative visualization. And here are some functions that we see. It can visually explain theology and doctrine when words are unable to do so. Okay, so if a person runs out of words, sometimes an image can substitute for that. It can express devotional love and faith through imagery. If you want to express your love in some way, and you aren't quite sure how, art can sometimes do that. It facilitates spiritual travel of the soul, having the meditator enter an inner religious landscape through the use of maps and pictures. And this is something we don't often see in books, but I did hear quite a bit of from informants. And it can invoke siddhis in yogic and tantric magical practice by the use of yantras and mandalas. And siddhis are supernatural powers. And there are a lot of yantras which can have a devotional goal, an expressive goal, or actually a goal to change you inwardly and to give you special abilities. So we're going to look at each of these areas. Okay, in discussing the process of visualization, the terms bhavana and kalpana are used by many sadhus to talk about imagining one's inner world through meditation, as is vikalpa, which suggests the world created by such visualizations. And this is a picture of a Bengali saint named Ananda Thakur. He had these visions of Adya Shakti Kali and ended up creating this whole temple complex called Adyapith, entirely based on visions. That is exactly where it came from. We have the term meditation as dhyanam, Sanskrit verbal root from dhyanam, which it's derived from is dhya, to think, to contemplate, to imagine. And they use the term bhavana, which derives from bhav, which means becoming, the subjective process of arousing mental states. So these are some of the terms you see people using when they're visualizing things. In meditation, inner and outer light can combine in many ways. So here we have a person who's meditating over there. And ideally, the outer light that you see in the world should echo the inner light that rises up in the heart. And in such meditation, images are not understood to come through the physical eye, but through the divine eye. So it's understood that you do not see physically, but that there are other special ways of seeing. Our first function is theological explanation, which can be seen in the image of the ritual practice of nyasa, or nash, as we talk about it in Bengal. The Shakta tantric placement of deities within the body, which correlate with deities outside the body. So what you do is you end up visualizing yourself looking sort of like that. And it shows visually how we may see and understand the body in different ways. So there have been a lot of maps and charts that talk about what parts of the body you should visualize in which ways and how it will help you or how it will affect you. Meditation can create different images to reflect different understandings of the body and the cosmos. So here we're still on theological explanation. This one is an image of Kundalini Yoga, so it shows the chakras. And it shows the inner self there contemplating the universe. And the heart can be a place for gods and goddesses to dwell. And there's sort of a classic image of Hanuman opening up his chest there for Ram and Sita. The inside of the body may be understood as a spiritually complex environment in Kundalini Yoga. So we have those little dotted lines, which are nadis, and we have the Ida, the Bengali, the Sushumna, all these different layers going through. In this particular one, they're focused on the Ajna chakra up by the top and showing how many layers there are, because that's the one that opens up so that you can travel inwards. Such visualization can also show the mysteries of cosmology, the ways that the universe comes into being. And this is a sort of Vaishnava image where you see sort of Krishna in the middle there. And there's Vishnu sort of creating the universe, and down there's the person meditating. It's actually kind of an interesting mixed picture because it's got chakras there, so it's kind of Shakta and Vaishnava. And here we have the universe being dreamed into existence. For both creation and emanation can be difficult processes to explain verbally. If you try to explain what's happening here just by words, it can be difficult, but when you start to see these images, it gives you an idea of what the myths and stories are talking about. And we can see this process of emanation also in Bengali Shaktism in this visual image. So here we have the goddess Kali, who's in the middle, and she is emanating the 10 Mahavidyas, who are her wisdom forms. So all of these are coming out from her. We even have images of Shiva visualizing the goddess. And this is sort of an interesting one. You could see it coming out of his forehead. We have the little stars coming out. There she is. So we have images of yogis who are meditating and deities can create each other. And this is a particularly interesting theological image because we have Kali down there, who is the origin of the goddess Tara. And Tara is the one in the middle there with red around her mouth. And she's manifest as the Kali Murti at the temple of Kaligat. And all of these are shown to be an aspect of both Shiva and Shakti. So on one side we have Shiva, the other side we have Shakti, and the entire thing is in a linga yoni if you look at the back. So we've got a lot of things going on in this one picture. And it shows soteriology, the idea of salvation for the devotee by being welcomed into a heaven, here the eternal Vrindavana. So if we look at different theological categories, soteriology is one. That's the category of salvation and showing how that can happen. Such imagery can visually argue for deities, such as, for instance, this one is arguing for the Vedic origin of Vaishnavism. So we see Vishnu at the top, and at the bottom, we see the churning of the milk ocean, and Lakshmi there, and lots of Vedic figures on the bottom there. So these are ways that theological claims can be envisioned and described through creative and meditative states. So our focus here is the theological side. And another function is the devotional or emotional aspect of religious visualization. And here we have specific scenes and deities imagined in human form. It's a way of becoming closer and more loving towards them. The abstract forms of mandalas do not always generate human emotion. Indeed, emotion can get in the way of yogic concentration and detachment. These are two very different styles of meditation. So we have mythic scenes and persons made real, and the devotee seeks to be closer to them. So we have human imagery as a specific style. And here's an interesting image that shows the Bengali understanding of Kali. Now, if you go to West India, Kali is very frightening. But when you go over to Bengal, she's actually only protective, and behind that protective image is a loving goddess. So they see Kali as really friendly and nice and happy, and she only has the dark side to chase away people who shouldn't be there in the first place. So I thought this was an interesting image showing the superficial versus the deeper side. And it can show the close relationship of the goddess and the devotees who love her. Here's Kali in a heavenly chariot with the Siddha Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who is understood by Bengalis as being not only perfected, but almost a god himself. They call him Ramakrishna Dev. You know, he is very close to the gods, and there she is appreciating him. Here, Kali is portrayed as a loving mother, and the devotee is a divine child in her arms, who she will save and protect. And you may notice that the child in her arms also looks a lot like Krishna. And in Bengal, there's a lot of unity between Shaivas and Vaishnavas, as well as some tension. Depends which group you're looking at. And here is Kali as a child. Okay, so the smaller one there is actually the goddess. And she's with Ramakrishna, showing the goddess's guidance and love for her devotee. So she's leading him around, and he's got his hand on his heart. I love you so much. And behind there is the more frightening form, but closer to him is the affectionate form. And she's got both. Now, devotees also express their love by performing sacred dance. Here we see some Shaktas on Durga Puja. So these women are performing special dances to the goddess. That's another form of imagery. And here we're moving over towards Vaishnavism. And visualization can generate religious devotion. It's one of the things visualization does. When the practitioner focuses on sacred events, this can encourage the development of prema, or sacred or selfless love, in the devotee. So prema, which is selfless love, is the opposite of kama, or selfish or lustful love. So when you see people who are being overcome by divine love, it kind of brings it into your heart, and you can share that state with them. Visualization can show devotees what's going on in the God's heaven. Here the heavenly Vrindavana. So if you were to say, what is heaven like? Well, if we look from the Christian perspective, we don't have a lot of clear images of it. But if we look from the Vaishnava perspective, there are tons of images of what heaven looks like. And there are people playing, dancing, singing, and in general, having a good time in heaven. And the devotees can echo the gods and express happiness on earth as their deities do in the heavens. So here we have people acting out heaven on earth. Visualization can help the devotee imagine a role model to worship or to identify with. And this is an image of Caitanya Mahaprabhu as a younger person. And Caitanya was understood as being a joint avatar of Radha and Krishna by the Bengali Vaishnavas. So he is being overcome by the emotions of both of them. So he actually has three personalities. He has his human personality, he has Radha's, and he has Krishna's. So he's a very unusual character and very central to Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So visualization can evoke love and give imagery to help the devotee to both imagine and contribute to the world after death. So here we have the world after death. Okay. Another function of religious visualization is to guide the yogi inwards towards the divine or spiritual worlds. This is an aspect of religious visualization that's rarely discussed publicly. These sadhanas are generally held secret, only revealed by teachers to initiates. So basically you have to take diksha, you have to be initiated into a special kind of mantra and lineage very often to be able to know these sadhanas. Now, some people are willing to talk about them and some aren't. So this is from the ones who are. However, there are tantras and other instruction manuals which describe the importance of travel to the inner worlds through meditative practices, techniques. There are also practitioners who are willing to go outside the bounds of traditional teachings, explaining the use of mandalas, yantras, and mantras during visualization. So the images which are seen are not ordinary images, but divine ones seen through a special gaze, divya drishti. Okay, so there he is looking upwards with a spiritual gaze. And thus, the visualizations that you have become darshan. They become the religious vision of a deity. Here we have Kali, either in the abstract form of a yantra, and this is considered to be Kali, but it's in her abstract form, or the vision may be in theistic form, with the goddess perceived as alive. So I put a GIF here so you could see it's kind of moving to show that she is indeed alive. Sadhus can be reminded of these meditative images by placing pictures in their caves and bhajan kutirs. So if you kind of look around there on the floor and on his altar, there's all different images for the sadhu to meditate on. We may call this the geographical function of religious visualization, bringing the yogi or devotee to the alokik spiritual places, especially the paradises of the gods. It may also be called the mystical function of visualization, because it's bringing you to inner worlds. The mandala acts as a map, which explains where to go and what to imagine, for this will bring the yogi to the goal. So if you see these kind of curls around the side, that's kind of like the labyrinth you enter into, and each layer of the lotuses is another set of worlds, and they've all got guardians and they've all got mantras that you need. So you go inwards from one level to another. As an example of this process, we may start with a mandala or yantra that's a coded map of spiritual worlds. This is sometimes called a Shri yantra, associated with the goddess Shri. So what you have is an image that is associated with taking you inwards to the goddess's paradise. The image starts to move and become alive, and the meditator can see light within its center. So you start out with an image that's two-dimensional and flat. Then the image starts to become more alive. It moves, it gets light, and it moves to being three-dimensional from two-dimensional. The light can be hypnotic, drawing the meditator inwards. So you start to see this light and the meditating person goes inwards. Guardians and associated deities may appear within the mandala, and the yogi should know the mantras to get past them. Okay, so very often you will have situations where there are guardian figures that keep you from the heaven worlds. So you have to know how to go past them. And there are various forms of esoteric meditation that will teach you how to go through them. Each aspect of the yantra has its own associated figures. So if you look closely, there are figures on each one of those little triangles. And the yogi should know of these in advance and how to deal with them. Okay, so a lot of your initiation deals with preparation for dealing with the mandala. Sometimes the yantra may appear as three-dimensional, a sacred mountain the devotee must climb. So if you put the Shri yantra sideways, what you can do is see something like this, and then you have to travel up that way. It may start to change colors or to spin or to move. It can also twist and appear distorted. So sometimes as you are moving, you'll see all kinds of turnings and twistings. Or it can change its background, opening up into the universe. So this thing is guiding you inwards. And the yogi travels inwards, always focusing on the center where the deity can appear. Now, this image is not actually a Sri Yantra, but I think it shows a very good image of what meditation is like, where things are moving past you and you always have to stay in the center. So you have to have one pointed concentration towards the center and everything else moves away around you. Now, the yogi needs to keep his concentration firm, or firm concentration among the many distractions you can find in the deeper states. So when you go into these deeper states of consciousness, there's a lot of distractions. But the bull among yogis, as the tantras like to say, travel inwards through the triangles, in the case of the Sri Yantra, like climbing through bars at a playground. In the US, we call them jungle gyms, where you kind of have children travel through bars and jump up and down. Here we've got something perhaps comparable. And then eventually the deity appears in the center of the yantra. For this yantra is the path to the goddess. This is her world. And when it opens up fully, what you'll do is you will see her in the middle of it. And here the god Shiva appears in the center of his mandala with his mantras circling around him. This particular one is not quite as authentic. It's kind of Western. Not only does it have psychedelic colors, it writes Om Namah Shivaya in English. So we've got kind of an interesting Western mix over here. Such descriptions of the inner worlds may also be shown in poetry and song. And here's an image of Ram Prasad Sen, the great poet of Shakta bhakti. Here he is fixing a fence, and there's a story about the goddess coming to him as a young girl. So we have the goddess, who she really is there. There she is as a young girl, and there he is fixing his fence. The vivid lyrics of religious songs may also encourage visualization. So we have the guy who's playing the instrument and singing, and he's looking inwards, but you can see these other people kind of looking off into the sky going, hey, what's going on here? So religious songs describe the eternal leelas of the gods and the worlds of their adventures. So here we have various people going into inner states. We have the guy who's playing the kartals, and we have that guy on the right who's got a very interesting look in his eyes. The spiritual light that is visualized can become brighter through song. The listener may be carried away by the images within the song. And these are kind of images where you're almost moving towards possession. Visualization may be enhanced by the use of drugs, especially charas or ganja or hashish. And the many varieties of tapas are also understood to help in visionary practice. And this is a 19th century image I thought was really interesting, because we have his head going right through the mandala, right through the yantra. So he is meditating on it like for his life. This is what he's doing. So this is an interesting ascetic image. The images shown in religious dance may bring about possession trance in the dancers. So people act out the behaviors of the gods, and they go into possession states where the gods are understood to be inside of them. And the physical world melts away, and the inner religious world comes into focus. So this is another sort of visualization process. But to move on to our specific traditions, we'll start with Gaudiya Vaishnavism and look at two styles of visualization. One of them is creating one's own spiritual body in the form of a young girl or manjari deha, okay, a manjari body, a servant or handmaiden of the gopis who loved and served Radha and Krishna. And another is creating one's inner body in the form of a young devotee of the Saint Caitanya Mahaprabhu, the one I mentioned earlier, as the gaur deha. And gaur is like golden or bright. And that reflects his skin, which was considered to be golden and bright. For both of these, the devotee must transmute the substance of lust or kama into a more condensed form of divine love or prema. Manjari sadhana, which the devotee imagines himself, and the practitioners, interestingly, are usually male, as a female servant of the gopis, gives each one of these characters, let's say the one on the bottom there, those two would be manjaris, a special name, age, color of sari, and form of service to the divine couple. So they would be visualizing this, and this is their spiritual practice. The manjari identity is an eternal one, begun through meditation during the devotee's life and continued into death. And then at death, the physical body falls away and the manjari's true inner self survives. So when you die, your physical body disappears, and that is the form of your body that will live forever. And the manjari body is sometimes understood as a pre-existing identity, one's true self, remembered through a ritual practice called smarana, where you're remembering what happened. And visualization here is understood as memory rather than controlled imagination. And in the afterlife, the person who performs this meditation also will be an eternal manjari. So you can either create it in this life, or you can remember it in this life from what you used to live in a previous life. There are also yogic siddhis which accompany this meditation. Knowledge of the true form of the souls, knowledge of the relationship between Krishna and the soul. So it's the manjari self as a person's true identity. So if you have, say, vhutasuddhi, which is power over place, you will go directly to Krishna's world of Goloka and have personal service to Radha and Krishna. So that kind of perfection involves a place. In sadhana siddhi, you have perfection, which comes about through spiritual practice. It's different than kripa siddhi, which comes due to the grace of Radha and Krishna, or nitya siddhi, which is eternal. So there are various perfections that you can have, and you can either create them yourself, or there may be something pre-existing, or there may be something you can get from a god. The goal of bhakti yoga and Gaudiya Vaishnavism is the perfection of love and gaining immortality through the generation and realization of immortal bodies. And one of the reasons that this is a desirable thing is because, according to some Gaudiya Vaishnava practitioners, the manjaris in their spiritual bodies feel Radha's emotions more intensely than she does. And such experiences of intensity make eternal life fascinating and ever new. So some of them say she feels it 10 times more. Some say the manjari feels it 100 times more. I've talked to people who say, no, it's 1,000 times more. All the love that Radha feels for Krishna, all the joy she feels in his presence, we feel even more of that. So it's considered to be a very beautiful state to be in. So that is the manjari lila. Now, if we move from that to the gaur lila, we're talking about another visualization practice within Gaudiya Vaishnavism. This one's also called the Navadvip lila, named after the town in West Bengal where Caitanya lived in the 15th century. Okay, so it's named after the place. And Caitanya was called Gaur or Gauranga. And according to modern practitioners in Navadvip today, they visualize themselves as young devotees of Caitanya. They wake him up in the morning, they help him dress, they travel in a group with him, and they share in his ecstatic states. So the same way the manjaris share the states of the gopis, we have these people who are sharing the companions, sharing the experiences of the companions of Caitanya. They claim that this form of meditation is more emotionally intense than the Vrindavana lila, for Krishna has taken on Radha's emotions while they share the human body of Caitanya. And as I mentioned, he's understood as a joint avatar of Krishna and Radha. So the visualized body in this practice is called the gaur deha, or the sadhaka siddha-deha. And there are some people who will practice that today. There is an earlier form of this visualization that you don't really see very much today. And that was called the Nagara Bhav, in which Chaitanya was an urban man about town. His devotees were married city women. It's closer to the Vrindavana stories of Krishna, except the gopis were rural married women rather than urban ones. And most people say this is largely gone out of practice, but it might still be practiced somewhere. Okay, so that's kind of a minority type. In Gaur Lila, the devotee gains an eternal life of singing, dancing, and service to Chaitanya, who's believed to be both Krishna and Radha in human form. And that guy standing up there is Chaitanya. The odds are good. The guy on his left is his friend Nityananda. And what's sort of interesting is that the devotee is not limited to one eternal life. In some cases, a person may have two. You can do both practices. You can have a manjari life with Radha and Krishna, and you can also have a Gaur Lila life. So you can have one body in two lives in two places, one soul mixed in different environments. As heaven consists of the eternal Vrindavana and the eternal Navadvip, it's possible to exist in both heavens at once in different bodies. To exist in two bodies and two heavens at once is to follow the Vaishnava idea of achintya bheda bheda, a simultaneous identity and distinction. And such bodies may also act as both observer and participant. Indeed, Krishna and Radha are often said to be both the same and different. And this image that we have here, which is both Krishna and Radha, shows something of that idea of unity and diversity. We also have Vaishnava bhakti yoga, in which the environment is visualized as well as the identity. Here, Navadvip itself is a divine lotus. So here we have sacred space being visualized. And it follows the idea that there's a heavenly Vraj Mandala where Krishna and Radha eternally play. And it can be visualized by devotees in the form of a map. So you can visualize a body, but you can also end up visualizing maps and worlds, and then putting the body into the map and the world. And this is a notably ISKCON version with the town of Mayapur at the center. And this is a more tantric version of Navadvip, the Nitya Navadvip mandala, which can be entered and explored. And it has a lot of the mandalas that you would need. So this is a little more on the Sahajiyas side. There are also books which describe how to get to the eternal Navadvip. Here we have one in a sort of English translation. Why be in Nitya Navadvip, how to be there, allegiance to the Goswamins, Yoga Peeth. So we have directions as to how to live in this eternal world. Indeed, the devotee has a whole realm of worlds which he or she may enter by means of visualization and devotion. So it is visualization that allows you to navigate through these various worlds and to see where the gods are and what their lives are like. So it's what gives you direct insight into supernatural worlds. In Gaudiya Vaishnava practice, we see the importance of visualization in both devotional love and bhakti yoga. Okay, so 2. It's also important in Bengali Shakta tradition, our second area, in devotional love of Kali, and in yogic and tantric meditation. And Kali may be visualized as a fierce goddess of death. And this happened to be a particularly active image showing these scary aspects of Kali. So this is where you don't want to get on her bad side. This is kind of the outer view of Kali. Kali as Mahadevi is understood as both the source of the universe and as all other goddesses, especially the Mahavidya emanations. So these are goddesses that she creates through her process of visualization. And in Bengal, probably the most popular one is Tara, the one that's over on the upper left there. it's sort of interesting because they've mixed Kali and Durga together, because I've got Durga's lion, there he is, conquering the demon, but they're all sort of mixed together. Kali may be seen as the true deepest self of the devotee and the primordial goddess who lives within the heart. So here you have a devotee, here you have somebody who's meditating, and inside there is what's really going on inside. So these kinds of pictures can kind of show two levels at once. And she can be seen as a savioress who guides the soul into new incarnations, saving it from falling into the worlds of samsara. So as Shaktas see it, when you die, you are lost in this vast ocean. And the ocean can be very dangerous. If you look over there, that looks kind of like a shark fin, kind of thing you want to avoid in the realms of samsara. But Kali can come down and she will hold you in her arms, or she will put you in her lap, and she will take you to her world. So there she is, being a savior for souls of all different colors, shapes, and sizes. She's the protector of the soul and the devotee on its dangerous trips. The assumption is that soul will be reborn many times, and then it can go to one of two paradises, one of at least two paradises. These are the two top ones that people talk about. One of them is Kailash, the paradise world where Shiva and Shakti live together, a place of wisdom and love. So that's kind of a mountain paradise. And the other one is the paradise of Manidvip, as described in the Devi Bhagavata Purana, where all the souls are female. This is something you hear about less often, but it is very interesting, because even the gods, when they visit, must be transformed into women in order to enter the island of jewels, Manidvip, hid in the ocean of nectar. Here the goddess is Adi Parashakti, the highest deity. And the Devi Bhagavata Purana talks about Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva going there and saying, oh, I don't want to be a woman. I like being male. And they said, no, you can't go into her paradise unless you change your gender. They say, oh, well. So they do. Then they don't want to become men again. So this is a Puranic story. Okay, so here's kind of an image of Kailash. And they have the divine family. They've got Ganesh over there. They've got the pets, the Vahanas. While she's also a dangerous goddess of death in the burning ground, stepping on the corpse of her husband, Shiva. Okay, so that's Shiva laying down there. And that's Kali kind of over him. In her form of Tarama, she's mother of the god Shiva, and she nurses him to save him from the poison that he swallowed. Okay, there's a story about Shiva saving the universe by swallowing this deadly poison. Stayed in his throat, and he got them in Nilakanta. But according to the Shakta Center of Tarapeeth, they have a little statue of this, and they say that really it was Tara's breast milk that saved Shiva from being poisoned. Otherwise, he would have died. And the reason that she had to turn into Tara was because you couldn't have a mother nursing her husband. It would be a rasabash. So we had to have Kali turn into Tara in order to be able to save him. Sort of an unusual story. But it's the big secret of Tarapeeth, if anybody ever goes to Tarapeeth. She's also one with Shiva, usually as Ardhanarishvara. But in Bengali Shaktism, she's Ardhanarishvari. Male plus female equals female. This is Shaktism. She's the universal mother, the savioress of the soul, and the goddess of tantric liberation. So we see the offering of java flowers around there as a wreath, and her face is kind of up at the top there. She can take on the form of all deities in her Vishvarup form, as Krishna could in Arjuna's vision in the Bhagavad Gita. So the same way we see in the Gita that Krishna could become all of the gods, here we have the goddess also becoming all of the gods, as well as other goddesses. So she has that same kind of power. The goddess may be seen in abstract form as the energy of Kundalini Shakti rising up to Sushumna. We've seen some of those kinds of images before. Or she can just be shown as feminine energy located within the body. These are some more modern images. So we've got Kali over there. You can kind of see her against the yantra. And there's sort of a modern version, green-skinned. She's a goddess of devotional love shown in poems and songs by poets such as Ram Prasad Sen. So there's Ram Prasad. He's shown kind of like a Baul there with his ektara. And there is Kali following him along. She can't resist his songs. And here's an example of one of Ram Prasad's poems. Because you love the burning ground, I have made a burning ground of my heart, so that you, dark goddess, can dance there forever. I have no other desire left, O mother. A funeral pyre is blazing in my heart. Ashes from corpses are all around me, my mother, in case you decide to come. Prasad prays, O mother, at the hour of death, keep your devotee at your feet. Please come dancing with rhythmic steps. Let me see you when my eyes are closed. So this is a poem asking for the goddess to save him when he dies. And here we have images of Kali as goddess of life and death. She's dancing on Shiva there. Kali may be understood as Mahadevi or Adi Shakti, the primordial goddess from whom the gods emerge. And there are the gods at the bottom who are emerging from her. She may be visualized as a wild tantric goddess of infinite power, whose many arms and legs show her many abilities and the many worlds in which she can act. When I asked tantrics why Kali had so many arms and legs, they said each pair represents a world she can act in. And when there's many of them, she can act in many worlds simultaneously. So here she's like acting in 20 worlds at once, and that shows how much power she has. Devotees may act out being possessed by Kali in ritual dances and plays, and this helps the audience to visualize the goddess. So here we have a woman in possession trance. The tongue coming out of her mouth shows that she is representing Kali, because that's one of Kali's symbols. Or Shakta saints may be possessed by Kali and enter into the state of Kali Bhav, where they see the universe through her eyes. And this is Ananda Mahima when she was younger, who was a Bengali saint. And she would often get possessed by Kali when she was younger. More recently, there is a South Indian saint called Amachi, and she began her possession trances with possession by Kali also. Then we have the modern westernized image of Kali as a personification of rage. And this is more of a feminist image of Kali. Or the devotee may visualize her symbol, the secret way to reach her. The goddess herself can become a mandala. This is also a modern version of Kali. A Bengali Shakta Shadika said this to me in an interview as she stared deeply into my eyes, and she told me she could see the goddess there. I do not feel that I'm only in a human body. Instead, I'm Shakti. I can feel that I'm Adyama. I am the mother, and all of creation is my child. If you do meditation, you too can realize that you're really Adyama. Ma divided herself throughout creation, and everybody has a piece of the goddess inside. In the end, all will come back together again, and everybody will become the goddess. This reflected her understanding of ekatmika bhav, and that was the word that she used, ekatmik, a state in which the goddess and the devotee share one atma or one soul. So she didn't want to talk about it till she looked in my eyes, decided the goddess was there. Then she said, okay, I'll explain it to you. This is a famous form of Adya Shakti Kali, the goddess of primordial power. This is the goddess she was talking about. After Ananda Thakur found her statue by following a vision, she commanded the founding of a temple complex and a new practice of worshiping photographs, which came to be called photo bhakti. So basically the goddess told him that she could be reached through photographs. And if you showed a photograph of the statue or even of a person being possessed by a god, then you could directly contact the god. So photo bhakti became a new form of bhakti. And it's another form of envisioning deities by means of photographs. So another aspect of visualization. Thus we see theistic and abstract styles of visualization in Bengali Shaktism. And we move over to the Bauls and poetic visualization. And that's kind of an image of a Baul and their favorite instrument called an ektar. The third tradition, the Bauls sing of the interior world. Their poetry speaks of Gupta sadhana, hidden or secret practices. And they're very famous for this. They get together in these big melas and they dance and sing and they chant these kind of secret sadhanas and they see who responds to them. Many of Bauls are primarily Vaishnava with songs about Radha and Krishna. This woman is singing at the Bengali Jayadev Kendali Baul Mela. And the Jayadev Kendali Mela is one of the biggest ones in Bengal. Very crowded. Everybody has these big tents. Other Bauls practice a form of Kali sadhana with poems about Shiva and Shakti. So we have different styles of Bauls. Some have a Sufi emphasis, as we can see in the name of the well-known Lalan Fakir. Okay, this is a Sufi name. Visualized here in an advertisement for his songs. Okay, this is not really Lalan Fakir. This is somebody who's dressed up as him. But many Bauls follow their own religion, in which the manar manush, or the man of the heart, is an elusive figure that the Baul must grasp through devotion and through meditation. So here we have a group singing about the man of the heart. The techniques of attaining the man of the heart are hidden, but described symbolically through poems and songs. For example, here's a Baul poem whose visualizations are similar to Zen koans in describing and imagining the impossible. A marvelous lotus fills the void. It has no roots in the water. It pervades the whole sky. The lotus has 1,000 petals where the golden beloved stays. How bright he is. One who has access to him and has known him is stripped bare. Okay, so all illusion disappears. Some forms of Baul sadhana involve meditation that involves deities in different places. Okay, so this is the sort of thing we also see with Sahajiyas, where the body becomes a place for gods. O mind, first you must learn the secrets of your body. Only then can you contemplate Hari. In which extremity lies Vrindavan? To your east or west or north or south? How many lotuses are there? On which lotus resides which moon? On which is Radha born and on which Krishna? Another question, O mind. How many men and women dwell there? Who sleeps when and who directs their dreams? So it talks about the body itself as a place that you kind of travel through looking for deities. And they compare the embodied soul to a bird in a cage. A strange bird of passage flits in and out of the cage. God knows how. If only I could catch it, I'd put on its feet the fetters of consciousness. What is it but my hard luck that the bird's so contrary? It's flown its cage and hides in the woods. O heart beguiled by your cage, You don't see it's built of green bamboo. Lalan says, beware, it will fall apart any day. Okay, so you put the fetters of consciousness on the soul, and that's how you capture it, and that's how you learn to travel. Here's a poem that compares the body to a pot that is not fully baked. And this is just sort of a nice Sahajiya one. As the man and the woman in me unite in love, the brilliance of beauty balanced on the two-petal lotus within me dazzles my eyes. The rays outshine the moon and the jewels glowing on the hoods of snakes. My skin and bone are turned to gold. I am the reservoir of love, alive as the waves. A single drop of water has grown into a sea unnavigable. Okay, and the single drop of water is the soul that comes to go throughout the ocean. Okay, so here's a bit more visionary poetry. Visionary experience can be beautiful or terrible, overwhelming. That's a sketch of mine. Whether they give visualizations of impossible things or describe states of direct darshan, Baul songs are intended to generate a sense of religious mystery in observers and listeners. Now, I think we are running out of time, so I'm going to skip to the end, and magic will have to be left as a mystery. Okay. So here we have the practice of visualization, bringing people to supernatural worlds, and we return to our initial analyses of the use of visualization in Bengali religion. It can visually explain doctrines when words are unable to do so, so it has a theological and educational function. It can express religious love and faith through imagery, thus it has a devotional function. It can facilitate spiritual travel of the soul, having the meditator enter an inner religious landscape by the use of maps, diagrams, and pictures. Thus, it has a mystical function. And it can evoke siddhis and yogic and tantric practices by the use of yantras, mantras, and mandalas. Thus, it has a magical function. The end.